Good evening, cheeseheads, and welcome to our Wednesday night show. Got a lot to discuss about today on the back of a very pleasing pre-season win. Lots to talk about, players in, players out, players who seem to be on a second coming. Joining me to discuss everything tonight, we've got a small group, a very exclusive group, I would say, of me and HG. HG, how you doing?
I have been waiting for this. Like, we started when it was me and Caller, just me and Caller back in the Euros a couple of years ago. And now, like, the level has increased that it gets to be me and you. I'm excited. I'm doing
I feel
well.
like,
Today was a good day, but yeah, I'm doing well.
yeah, no, it was a good day. I mean, I've been at work today, and I can tell. Someone may comment about the fact I look like I'm wearing a suit because that's what we are in the Tuesday when we're just suits. But but I am wearing a suit. I've been at work today. I didn't get to watch the game. All cards on the table for those watching. I've watched the extended highlights. Have you watched it, HG?
I watched the same extended highlights as you did. I decided that I would
Perfect.
rather go and have lunch with a mate of mine while the game was on.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're not coming from a massive expertise about today's game, but I think generally when we're talking about players, I don't think today's game would have affected our opinions that much. But happy to be corrected by those who are watching the show.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and obviously, you guys that are watching the show, 37 of you already, please do like and subscribe and tell us what you wanted to talk about. If there's something you wanted to talk about, put it in the chat. Do a super chat if you really want to go all out, and we will get around to looking at them. I've already seen 2 mentions at least of the criminal case. We will discuss that briefly at some point in the night. But let's just start, HG. I think let's start with pre-season so far. The friendly, obviously, we've had a bit of a mismatch of a pre-season. Obviously, the game being cancelled earlier in the week because of the monsoon in Thailand. What did you make to all the hurrah about that and the fuss that was made about the fact that Levy's at fault for us not playing a game in Thailand?
Levy is always at fault for some. Look, you can't do a great deal about the weather. Like, I mean, I've said on previous shows, I don't like us going that far, really. I wish we would stay in Europe for a pre-season. I understand that we've got sponsors and all the rest of it in the Far East, and we're in America one year, Far East the next. It's not that many years ago since we were in Singapore anyway, because Spurs have been showing that Harry Kane wonder goal repeatedly on various feeds. But like, I wasn't bothered that the game was. It's frustrating and it's annoying, but to me, the tour was more about Ange deciding who he wants to keep, and as much as playing an extra game would probably help that, I'm not sure an extra game against Leicester would have been like is keeping someone at the club. I imagine that Ange has already decided kind of where he wants to go, and I don't think today's game would have affected too much either. Because I mean, Lion City, as much as they're a big name in Singapore, I just think that Ange is more interested in who works at the club and who he bonds with and who has a decent attitude because he's all about mentality.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I will say on the pre-season friendly, I've managed football teams at a semi-professional level. I've done it. I had my stint at doing it, and I always felt as a coach that I get more out of training than that you do in a friendly. You don't necessarily. You like to see what you're doing on the training field is in some of the patterns of play being developing, but in the main, I would rather spend 2 hours on the training field with a group of players, and I'm sure Ange has been the same. When we're trying to embed a new philosophy, a new style of play, new patterns, and everything else, that's the time of the training field is just as important, I think, as the friendly. The friendlies are great. You get the match fitness, you may get a bit of sharpness, but they'll get that anyway, won't they, over the course of the next few games? It's not like there's no more pre-season friendlies between now and the first game.
And I think it's interesting that it's been very Football Manager our pre-season in the fact that there's been lots of intra-squad friendlies, and I'm okay with that because they understand we have 31 on the tour. Not all 31 can stay at the club, even if they wanted to, which you imagine some don't. But not all can stay, and some may want to. Some may want to play Premier League football, and so you'd imagine there's a level of competition there between those that are on the fringes, let's say. But yeah, I don't know. Like I feel as if all these games in training that the club have been very keen to point out that we've had winners, whether it's been 7-a-side games or whatever. But it's developing some kind of camaraderie that maybe we haven't seen, and certainly under the
Yeah.
last few managers, we really haven't seen that. Apart from the kind of we all defend each other rather than we're actually happy to be with each other.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting. Kerry's put this comment in. It feels like we're miles behind. I don't feel that. I feel like whatever we're trying to do in pre-season is on schedule. I mean, we saw today, even with the extended highlights without watching the full game, that Ange is getting his philosophy through to these players, and we're seeing it, aren't we? Yeah, certainly shoots of that coming through. I wouldn't expect us to be any further forward.
No, I mean, and the stats for today's game were very similar for the stats to the West Ham game.
Mm,
We had, I mean, like, granted, you'd expect them to be against Lion City, but still, like, we dominated the ball. We had lots of shots. We got a number on target, and we scored more. So if you look at it in that perspective, then okay, scoring 5 is better than scoring 2. If you take away the fact that Lion City are obviously worse than West Ham, then maybe
mm,
scoring 5 is similar to scoring 2. But I still
mm.
think that they're trying to figure out like what works best, because if you're playing a certain style of football that's very different to what you've done before, then some will just adapt quicker than others because it suits them more than it does others. But I just like the idea of
Yeah,
being behind other teams. Like, obviously we would have preferred to play the game against Leicester, and we would have preferred to play Roma rather than Lion City. So there are things that haven't really worked in our favour, but there are still, what, 2.5 weeks until the
yeah,
first game of the season? We've definitely got the 2 games, that final week against Shakhtar and Barcelona. I'm sorry, but I firmly believe there will be at least one like behind closed door friendly over the next 10 days before the Shakhtar one. So I don't
yeah.
think it's just going to be training, training, training. And like, we can complain about what might have happened and what could have been better, but I think we'll see under Ange it's much more okay. Well, how do we deal with where we are now? Like, things have had to
Mm,
change, but he said in prior interviews that okay, we did a double training session in Singapore and we worked
mm,
them hard because the weather was hot, and like, it's not been easy, but you adapt to the situation. And I don't. I personally quite like that. I don't want to see a manager already bemoaning this, that, and the other. Just get on with it
mm.
and do the best you can.
Yeah, I'm quickly falling in love with Ange. Honestly, everything about him, just the way he talks, the way he presents himself. It's just different level, isn't he, in terms of what we've been used to? For me, anyway, since what we've been used to in the last few years.
I feel like it's like a Martin Yole regen. Like
Yes,
he's the I mean,
yeah,
I put it out there. I love Martin Yole. I absolutely love the bloke. I loved him when he was our manager because it felt like someone you would have a drink with down the pub has suddenly got the job that you would love to have, but
yeah,
wasn't an arsehole about it. Like, didn't have this kind of delusions of grandeur, but just like, this is me, take it or leave it. I'm not going to change. And I love that about Ange. I mean, when we
mm,
talked about who we wanted to come in as managers before he was appointed, like, I liked that about Ange. We talked about who was going to come in when Mourinho was dethroned, and I was like, I want feel good factor. I wanted Martin Jol to come back for those 7 games, not Ryan Mason. So I feel like
mm,
that's a big thing for Spurs, and so to have someone there, like, yeah, obviously, I'm hopeful that things are going to be amazing. I don't have much to go on apart from that, but I would much rather have a manager like Ange than really anybody else right now.
mm. Yeah, definitely. Like I say, I'm all in on Ange already. In terms of style of play, I think you talked about it. The stats against West Ham and the opposition today have been similar, in excess of 70% possession, oodles of shots on target or shots at goal anyway. What have you made to this the feast of attacking football that we're seeing? Because I certainly think well, I'm excited by it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited, and also it makes me nervous because of just like what's going on here. Like, my
Yeah,
football watching experience has changed, and so now I feel like I'm watching an action movie rather than some period drama. Sorry, sweetheart. But like, it's a bit more. It's just exciting. You never know what's going to happen. So that
yeah,
is good. But yeah, until you play a real competitive game, it's going to be different. But if we really do this against Brentford on the 13th, um, I will definitely feel alive. I will be nervous, of
mhm,
course, that we might get caught out, but yeah, I want to see Spurs attack. I really do. I like seeing us attack. I
Yeah, I
like
do.
seeing movement off the ball. I like seeing runners and risk taking because, like, if we are good enough to win the ball high up the pitch and we can do that, then brilliant. I mean, that's the key thing.
Mm,
We've got to be good enough as a team to win it back quickly, so that teams can't really hurt us on the counter. But I mean, if you look at the best teams in world football over the last, certainly in English football, over the last 5 to 10 years, they've played this kind of football. I
yeah.
want to see Spurs do that too.
Yeah. What is interesting about the way we're playing at the moment, and you've seen this pattern develop over the two games today on the extended highlights. There's a point when Udogi and Porro were almost up in line with the forwards. They were so
Mm.
far at the pitch, and we just had those two centre halves just set at the back. It's almost like you know, a two whatever, 2-3-5, whatever the formation was. The fullbacks are just so attacking. It's unbelievable, isn't it? And I think the reason I mentioned that partly is because of this thing about we haven't got defined fullbacks or defensive fullbacks. We and Ange made a point about the profile of players being Porro and Udogi, the profile of players they want at fullback. That probably leads to the fact that we're going to have 70% of possession of the ball. They're going to be in the final third of the pitch for the majority of the game. You don't want a Ben Davies at left back, do you, or a defensive-minded fullback?
I certainly feel that in some games you could get away with having two super attacking ones. I am still pragmatic enough to think that in other games you won't be able to really do that as fully as you might want, and that you'd
Yeah,
have to be a bit more secure, let's say, at the back. So I expect that in many games I would rather see one attacking player as opposed to, or certainly fullback, than having both. And I saw the comment that we've seen, that I know you started up. Here we go. It's from Jazz. It comes up here and it says like Porro right back. Look, I don't think that Porro is probably the best right back we have for what he wants to do. I will say that. I think
Mm.
Royal, even from what we saw last season, when Royal was kind of joining in midfield, which he did a number of times, like I feel like we were getting decent results, and he would become like that third midfielder for a while. I think Emerson Royal is probably the best inverted right back we have, but I can understand why Ange. But I want Porro's skills in the team because if you
Mm.
score goals, who is more likely to do that? It's definitely Pedro Porro. So yeah, like again, the preseason games they may not mean too much, but I can understand why he like I want maybe he just wants to see what Porro can do. He wants to see
Yeah,
how he adapts to it because it's not his natural game to play kind of in midfield. He is much more. He's always been more of a winger come wing back. So it's interesting that the choice has been there. But I think that like if you ask me who I want to see against Brentford on the first day, I want Emerson Royal playing right back.
right.
I'm quite
Yeah.
happy to admit that.
Yeah, yeah. It will be interesting. It'll be interesting, people in the comments, maybe, based on what you've seen so far, what would be your starting 11 come first game of the season,
Oh my
based on
gosh.
what we've seen? Because it's a great question. And I do think there will be some, and we'll get onto this in a minute. I think there'll be some surprise names in there because one of the things that has taken me about the tour has been some of the players that have seemingly been excluded, probably because they're on their way out or for other reasons, and then those players that seem to be having a second coming at Spurs. And if we start with the second coming, one of those I think has to be the Celso, right? What a pre-season tour he's put in.
I know.
Unbelievable.
It's been 90 minutes and we're like, oh my word, who is this guy?
Where's he
Um,
been?
look, it's very easy to say this now, and I recognise that others will be like, you're only saying it now. But I have always been a fan of Lo Celso. I always have. Like, I think even just before COVID, when he was playing in a two-man central midfield with Harry Winks, there were moments there that I was like, this guy has a bit of everything. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't see him as in a two-man midfield. I don't think he's really strong enough to do that often. But certainly in the three-man that was the system that we're playing, he's perfect. You stick him on the left-hand side, he's only got 1 foot. We know that. And I feel like watching him. I mean, when I saw the goal today that he scored, I feel like I'm watching a football manager goal. Like he's so deliberate with his shots, right? Like he never puts his foot through it. It's always trying to place it in the corner. I mean, I say that he obviously scored against West Ham by putting his foot through it, but it was just this idea of like if he has the time to think about it, he's very deliberate. Everything he does is deliberate. And I like that. You need to have intelligence, and I think he has it. And if you give people who have football intelligence time on the ball, they will hurt teams. So I have to say, I'm not surprised that this also is looking this good. We can talk about the strength of the opponent as much as we want, but I do think that Lo Celso, this system was designed for him. I think it suits
Yeah.
him. Like with so many runners off the ball, like if he's got whoever it is, whether it's Perisic or Son or whoever, if he's got a left winger making runs in behind, and if he drops a bit deeper and there's a fullback making those runs in behind, that's exactly what he wants. He needs to have that movement because he has the ability to pick those passes and to see those passes. And as we've seen in the last couple of years at Spurs, we haven't really played those players very often.
No.
Even if we've had them on our books, they've not been at Spurs. So this is the perfect chance for him. And like I recognise that maybe there are teams in Spain that would like him and that we could get good money for him, especially now he's playing well. And I think he's only got a couple of years left on his deal, and so Spurs might be thinking, hey, like if he has a good season, maybe we let him go. But if there is a player on our books that is made for Ange's system, it is probably him. And I think he's shown it in the 90 minutes we've seen from him. He has shown that he is a very, very good football player if you give him time on the ball.
And you talk about the level of opposition, but he did it against West Ham. I think did he come on at West Ham? Did he start at West Ham?
No, he came on in both games.
Came on, and he it felt like second half he changed the game. He really did change the game.
Look, I will say that because I mean, the team that started against West Ham, if memory serves me right, we had Bissouma at the back of the midfield three, and then Skip was on the right and Maddison was on the left. And I came on a show after that and I said, I don't think Maddison on the left really suits Maddison. I think he wants to play. I mean, logically, if Lo Celso's left-footed, he wants to be down the left, and if Maddison's right-footed, he wants to be down the right. And I feel as if that's probably happened. That not that Maddison played badly, but that just Lo Celso was a better fit for that role, and so he looked better. I would like to see the two of them play together for 45 minutes or for an hour or whatever the next stage of preseason will be. But I think that Lo Celso has definitely, if you consider that he's playing on that left-hand side of the attacking three, it suits him, and we need to find a way to make that happen regularly.
Yeah. Do you think Ange ball just suits Lo Celso? It's made for him this way of playing.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, like he's always been hardworking. I always think he's been a hardworking midfielder. He's not afraid of he may not be the best tackler. I mean, we've seen him. I think it was at Chelsea. He got away with a red card that probably should have been given and wasn't a few seasons ago. But you're putting him, let's say, 25, 30 yards from the opponent's goal all the time. Like if Ange ball works, that's where he's going to be. He's not going to be making lung-busting runs to try and get up and join an attack. He is going to be part of it. And clearly that suits him. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy. But in tight areas and when he gets the chance to... I mean, like if you look at David Silva at Man City was a wonderful player, but there was nothing physical about David Silva. It was all about what he did when he had the ball. And the way that Man City played gave him time on the ball. The same with Gundogan. Gundogan is not that kind of player that you would want to be playing counter-attacking football. Lo Celso, he's not as good as those two, right? I will say that. But I think there are similarities that if you get them playing in that position, he will hurt you. He has the ability to cross the ball. He has the ability to play little dinks in between. And I think he's decent in front of goal. I think Spurs will be much better with him around.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's not one on the face of it now you want to sell, is he? I mean, what's it going to... We're going to have to spend 30 million to replace him, essentially.
This is it. Like if we had someone behind him, like a left-footed younger version who was similar, then maybe. But we don't. We're not really. The thing is, like both Lo Celso and Ndombele, to be fair, are probably more set for that role. Yeah. And they came in at the same summer. One of them is probably going to leave, you'd think, this summer. I mean, I would like both to stay, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. And so, Lo Celso is ahead because he's been fit and been able to prove himself. But we all saw those training videos before Ndombele got injured that proved that he was enjoying training under Ange. Obviously, he wants to play with the ball as well. So I think we've got options. We've got a number of midfield options that look good. I've seen a few comments about Papsar looks a bit of a beast. Bissouma looks rejuvenated. We are not short of options by any means, and that's a great thing because, like, I would rather have, if we've got 8 midfielders and we need to get rid of 1 or 2, I would rather have a situation where we like all 8, rather than a situation where we only like 3. And it's like, now what? We've got to keep people around who we don't want to keep around. But I don't want to talk about the defence just yet.
No, we'll get there. But I think we've got Bissouma's been interesting because he has felt like I know it seems strange to say it's like a new signing, isn't it? It's a bit like the Celso in many ways. You've got two players who are coming in if they can stay fit, who they just weren't available for us last season. Celso alone, obviously, Bissouma injured for most of the campaign. And I think in this system again, you've got 2 players that are they just enjoy being in this system. And I just think, and before even last season, I remember we say about we didn't have worries about midfield in terms of we had strength and depth. We've got even more strength and depth there now, haven't we? It's crazy, and it's going to be interesting when it comes to considering Bissouma, Sarr, Lo Celso, Højbjerg. Who else am I missing? Maddison.
Yeah, Maddison is the one I tend to forget always as well, which is weird. But we have a number of players and good attacking 8s who would be perfect for what Ange wants to do. I mean, I really believe that.
Yeah, exactly. So here's a question then, HD, putting you on the spot. Your Spurs manager, first game of the season, what's your midfield 3?
Bissouma, Maddison, and I think we would be stupid not to play Lo Celso. I mean, bearing in mind what he's doing. Don't get me wrong. Like I've said before on shows that Brentford will probably play a midfield 3, right? They like their 3-5-2, and their midfield 3 will involve probably 2 6-footers, right, and a mobile player. They're not like when Brentford turned it round against us last season, because we were winning at home and they scored 3 in the second half to beat us. They decided to not be as negative as they were, and they brought on, I think, Damsgaard to play as a number 10, a more creative player. And once that happened, we couldn't live with them. Like their midfield 3 was suddenly too good for our midfield 2. So but there is always a concern that first game of the season they won't want to lose. And maybe Maddison, Lo Celso and Bissouma is a bit lightweight as a 3. But if we're playing the way Ange wants us to play, we will be winning the ball. We will be keeping it away from the Brentford 3, whoever they are. So it's a bit of a gamble, I think, with those 3. But Sarr is the only one who probably has a chance of dislodging that, I would say. And obviously, Sarr is a bigger player. I don't think Højbjerg has a real chance to start that first game. He may not even be at the club, from what I'm seeing in the comments. But I think like Papsar is the kind of, he's probably a bit of everything. Like I think as an 8, he has the mobility to get around the pitch and make good passes. But even as a 6, I could see him having I could see him personally being Bissouma's kind of rotational option in that area. So Sarr is super important to what Spurs want to do, and I think Ange said so in a quote yesterday. He talked about how he loved him being around the place, how he's super happy no matter what. Which every job needs people like that to help the day go smoother. But it's not going to be an easy call. But I think that when you've spent 40 million on Madison will play, right? I mean, if Lo Celso continues to have the preseason he's had, it would be foolish not to. So then the question is the experience of Bissouma or the youth of Sarr, and probably the experience would win out. But again, it's a nice combination or a nice worry to have.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just looking at the squad that went out. So we've talked about obviously at Lo Celso, who's on his redemption. Those players that haven't featured, we'll come out. Yeah, those pictures that haven't featured. Joe Rodon obviously is out there training. No indication that he's not fit. Obviously not playing. I mean, that probably tells us everything we need to know about where his future lies, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is it. Like, considering that we've named 22 players, right? It's been a first 11 and a second 11, and if you weren't on, like, I actually think Harvey White was named on the bench for today's game and was the only one who didn't play. But again, like, if that makes him number 23, then that's good for him. but bad for the people who aren't there. So whether it's Rodon and, I mean, again, like people like Scarlett and Keeley, I don't think that we need to worry. Whiteman got injured, obviously, in training. But for
Yeah,
those players like Rodon and Spence, they look on the outs already, which is,
yeah.
I mean,
I mean, let's talk about the Spence thing. What's going
okay,
on with Spence? The conundrum with Spence, there's something not right there. Again, there's no indication that he's injured
yeah,
from what I've seen or heard, unless anyone in the group chat corrects me, in the chat corrects me. He's been training, he's been fully participating. He's just not there. So again, you've got to conclude something's not right.
he's third of the three, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's, I think we can conclude that for sure. Do I want to see him play for Spurs? Yes. I mean, I do. I want to see him given minutes. I think, like, people like Joe Rodon, I don't, because I think Joe Rodon, for me
no, yeah,
personally, has never really looked good enough for the Premier League. He always looks nervous. But with Spence, you don't know. And would Spence be a better fit to play in a kind of as an inverted fullback than Porro? I mean, in some ways, maybe the answer is yes. Like, if we talk about what Man City were doing with Kyle Walker, they were doing something similar last season, and Kyle Walker's pace kept him in the side. If Jed Spence has the pace to get back, then you could be seeing him do that for Spurs. He's obviously a very fast player, but it's interesting that it does feel to me that Ange wants to get Porro into that team somehow. And even though
yeah,
I don't think he's a great fit for it, and if it was me, I'm keeping all three fullbacks. I mean, I genuinely would, like, my squad would have Spence, Royal, and Porro in it.
right.
But it's horses for courses. Like, I think Spence has a role to play, and it's surprising that we haven't seen at least a little bit. But had there been a third game, I suspect that today's game would have been the chance for Rodon to get some minutes and for
Yeah,
Spence to get
yeah.
some minutes. And because because it was our second game in the end, Ange decided to basically stick with let's say, what would have been the plan for the Leicester game.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not forgetting that we've still got Brian Hill back at base, obviously with his back injury. Bentancur still out with his knee, and Ryan Sessegnon. I mean,
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about him.
this is what I mean. There's players coming out of every orifice, literally. I just don't know what we're going to do with
Literally,
them all.
whose
Literally.
orifice are we talking about?
Well, well,
The
well.
side, the
Celso
side,
wanted it
the
very
side door
intimate.
of the training centre is what you mean, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's what are we going to do with all these players? It's crazy. Sessegnon stays. He's injured. He's not going to get sold, is he? So
No,
he's there.
no, but he
Yeah.
won't. But he won't be named in the squad either.
No.
I mean,
No.
even if he was fit, I'd be surprised if he was named in the squad. The only thing that goes in Sessegnon's favour is that he counts as being homegrown, and because he's been at Spurs since he was 18, he might even count as club grown. But we don't need to worry about that because we're not in Europe. I think on the left hand side we're well
Yeah.
stocked, and Sessegnon, even if he was fit, would be at the lower end of the pecking order, the lowest end of the pecking order. But look, I'm sad about Brian being injured, because we
Yeah, I
talk
am.
about a redemption arc for Lo Celso. I have a feeling that playing left wing in this team of Ange ball would be the making of Brian in English football. I really do. He doesn't have the ability to cut inside and shoot that maybe a Kulusevski would do, or a Son might do, or even Solomon. So, like, he may not be first choice in any of those positions, but if the choice is, do you want Brian Hill or Perisic to be part of your squad, then obviously, short term, you might take the crossing of Perisic, because obviously we know that he can do that. But Brian Hill as a long-term option, like in this kind of system, it could really suit him. So I'm sad that he's not on the trip, but yeah, like I think he will end up being one that got away a little bit. Like if he leaves England, I suspect he'll go back to Spain, and I suspect he'll play his entire career in Spain from that moment. I don't think that if Brian Hill leaves Spurs, he's going home and he'll have a very good career in Spain rather than go on to be the next famous Spanish
Yeah.
left winger.
Yeah, no, I agree. On that left winger side, Dan's put about Perisic certainty for being out the door. Well, he was. Everyone thought he was going to go, but actually, he's had a good tour. To be fair, hasn't he? He's impressed in parts.
But like, again, even Perisic has played left wing for what? Wolfsburg, Dortmund.
Yeah.
Inter Milan. I mean, obviously, he was a wing back once Conte realised he could do it. Once Perisic went and won the Champions League with Bayern as a wing back, it was like, oh, maybe you could do that for Inter. But again, like, I don't want Perisic starting games, right? I mean, that might sound crazy, and there may well be times when it's possible. But to me, with Son and with Solomon and with other options down that side, he's probably not going to be doing that. But again, if we're looking for a goal, like, he's proven for Spurs that he can find half a yard and he can cross the ball with accuracy, and it might provide something different. That's the thing with Perisic. You do know what you're going to get, and he's clearly super fit. Clearly, he can actually play. He probably could play the whole system, to be honest, for 90 minutes. I just don't think he will for Spurs. And we've got a year left on his deal. We're paying him a lot of money. If he went somewhere else, we're almost certainly paying most of that money, unless he was going to be really generous and literally just rip the contract up. But maybe he's going to enjoy playing for Ange. Maybe he can wait a season before going back to Croatia and finishing his career there. It's a good option to have. Like, as much as we all know that we need to get rid of players, I like the idea that we are, culling people who could do something, rather than ended up keeping people who we know deep down aren't going to be good enough.
Yeah, and we know, don't we, HD? There's not a shot for anyone to say that Spurs always struggle to get rid of players. Our players are on high wages, hugely high wages, big contracts, and some of them aren't in a particular rush to leave, are they? So, and more importantly, as you, HD, I'm sure you know better than most, the money's not in Europe for these players. There's not the market to buy players from the Premier League. So. Sorry.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, what I've seen with certainly with the Spanish teams. I think Sociedad have qualified for the Champions League, so they've got a bit more money than they might be used to. And I suspect. I mean, they also sold the striker Isak. They sold him to Newcastle, so they had a bit of money anyway. And I've seen them being linked with Bryan Gil, which would make sense, right? It's a chance for them to sign a player that has won things with Sevilla. That is obviously still very young. It could work for them, and so that might be an option. But you're right. There's no money in European football. The leagues do not have the money that the Premier League does. I mean, we're looking at, like, really good managers from Europe are now in the Premier League. Like, the guy at Bournemouth is a serious talent when it comes to managing, and he went to Bournemouth. Like, we are. I mean, take away the Saudis, but the Saudis is still a bit of a retirement league. But when it comes to European football, the Premier League is where it's at. And teams, like, I would like to think that wages are the reason we can't get rid of Lo Celso and Ndombele and a few of the others. I think it's definitely true with Ndombele, but I don't think it's true with all of our players. It's not as if Levy hands out crazy wages. It might be more than what they used to paying in on the continent, but it's not as if AC Milan or Inter Milan are not offering good money. They are, but I think they're just realizing that, sadly, those Spurs players that were signed over the last 3 or 4 seasons, you'd have to have a very good memory to remember them playing well. Is that an awful way of putting it? Like,
No,
Spurs
not
have,
at all.
they just haven't been able. Like, the reason why Lo Celso was wanted is because he went to Spain and he did well, right? And the reason why Napoli want Ndombele again is because obviously he went there last season, helped them win the league, but they don't want to take him on permanently because they have no reason to. So it's frustrating, but it's understandable. Like, if you don't have a huge amount of money to spend, taking on someone like, I mean, the players that Spurs might want to get rid of, who will cost, we want, like, I mean, Højbjerg is a weird one too, because you're going to get a good fee and probably have to pay him quite a bit of money. And I don't know, but yeah, the players that we want to get rid of, English teams don't want them either. I mean, it's not just that foreign teams don't have money. There are English teams that aren't really willing to pony up for Sanchez or Dyer or any of the others that we might want to see go.
Yeah. I mean, it does look like, out of all those ones, Sanchez is the most likely to leave imminently. I think there's obviously something in the works in the background. I think he had an offer from Russia, which he's turned down, understandably, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I don't think many would go to Russia right now. No, but I think there's others in the offering, so he'll probably be gone. But it's difficult because there's not really any noise about anyone else, is there, at this point? It's strange.
I mean, even Lloris. I mean, this is it. Like,
Yeah.
Lloris is in England to explore the options that we don't hear about. Sanchez, like again, like if I'm a Spanish team, I'm looking at Davinson Sanchez and saying that there might be something there. It's a low risk move, right? I mean, if you look at the amount of money that is being spent within Europe, there are lots of 10, 15 million deals, maybe a little bit less. Certainly, even within their own leagues, like you see Spanish teams selling to other Spanish teams. But so I think that Sanchez is probably worth 10 million euros to someone. But again, maybe he's not anyone's first choice because he hasn't played much football, and when he has played, he's not looked particularly good. And if you're not following Spurs week in week out, you're probably not going to blame Spurs or Conte for that. You're going to look at the failings of the player, and so again, it's annoying to see Chelsea selling all their players. But if you look at the players that they're selling, a lot of them have played for Chelsea relatively recently. And they've won the Champions League with Chelsea relatively recently. Like Sanchez hasn't been a full-time player at Spurs for what, 3 seasons?
No. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like it's annoying, but it is kind of logical, sadly.
We're probably going to end up, aren't we, towards the end of the season, end of the transfer window, sorry. And we are going to end up ripping a few contracts up, aren't we? It's got to happen. It's inevitable.
If there are players with a year left on their deal, we can name names, but there are a few players.
Yeah.
If there are players with a year left on their deal who don't make that squad, right? Who are and they won't play football for 6 months. They might go out on loan. I mean, maybe there'll be a chance for that to happen. But we did it with Aurier, we did it with Doherty. I mean, obviously Doherty was a few months later, but we have started to pay up these contracts. But
Yeah.
we're not good. I don't think we're going to pay up someone like Dombele unless we really, really have to, because that's serious money if we do that. And I mean this nicely. Dombele, you get the impression that money means a lot to him, right? I mean, it means a lot to all of us, but you know what I mean? Like some players sign for Spurs and you think that makes sense. And
Yeah.
yeah. So, and it's not just him. There are others. I mean, I've always thought that Romero is someone who signed for Spurs for the money.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think he signed because he wanted to play for Nuno. I don't think he signed because he wanted to play Conference League football. I think he signed because Spurs were going to pay him very well and give him a 6-year deal and guarantee that future for him. Like again, it's not as if he was being paid peanuts at Juventus. I'm sure he wasn't, or at Atlanta or whatever. I mean, 'cause I know he was kind of between the two, but yeah, I mean, they're in that awkward place of being able to offer good money, and so we do. But if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, we struggle to shift.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's in terms of incomings outside of the business we've already done. Obviously, Ange has publicly said we're aiming for at least one centre back, which caused all sorts of meltdowns all over social media. But at least one centre back. I think we've talked about this on the pod before, haven't we? Two would be ideal, but realistically, one's what we're going to probably end up with.
No, I think two is what we're going to end up with. If I'm honest,
Do you think we'll end up with two? And who are the two? Who would you put the two on? Who would it
Honestly,
be?
that I don't know. Given that Van der Ven is, let's say, the middle option
Yeah.
when it comes to expense, I suspect he will be one of them. And then the
Right.
question is, do we push the boat out and get Tapsoba? I mean, if you take the three names that are coming up most often, then you're looking at Tapsoba and you're looking at the Fulham guy, Tosin. Tosin's not going to be cheap, by the way. Like Fulham aren't just
Yeah.
going to give him away.
No.
But I think that, I hope Longley is not an option. But I do think that whether it's loan or whatever, I do think there will be two new centre backs. I do think that. I'd like them both to be permanent, and I'd like them both to be, of a quality that I want to see at Spurs long term. But I don't see one. To me, would not be enough, and so I'm still on the train with 5 weeks to go that we will find two. I do
And
think
it,
the issue. So, but I
yeah,
think the issue with Spurs right now is that we've taken 31 players on tour, right? And so some of them have to go, and we
yeah,
can't end up with a situation that we've got 33 players that that are in the squad. We need to get rid of a few before we bring others in.
yeah. Gov is right, by the way. Hit the like button. I think your chickens is meant in a very affectionate way.
Yeah, we all love
But yeah,
chicken. Everyone loves
yeah,
chicken.
Everyone's chicken. If we're bringing in two, then HG, I'm interested. Who would be the two centre backs that would stay? Romero, obviously one. I'm guessing, because I'm guessing you're going to have four centre backs in the squad. So
Yeah.
you've got Romero's one. So who's the next? Who's the other one that stays for you?
It will either be. Oh my gosh! It will either be Dyer or Tanganga.
Right. Okay.
I have a feeling it might be Dyer, in the fact that he's only got a year left. I don't think he wants to go. He's just got married. I mean, there are.
Married, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Again, like he's in no hurry, right? And I don't hate Dyer as much as a lot of people do. I will say this about Dyer: I don't think he's suited to Ange ball whatsoever, which is a problem. But if we end up with Romero, I mean, let's go. Let's be hopeful. If we end up with Romero, Tapsoba, Van der Ven, and Dyer, then Dyer is that fourth option. But weirdly, if that was the case, I would rather, like, if you're looking at Sanchez and Dyer and saying, like, they've both got a year left on their deals, which one do you want to keep? I would probably keep Sanchez, because I think Sanchez is a better fit for Ange ball. But Sanchez is wanted by teams, and you get the impression that Dyer isn't. So Dyer may well be the fourth. But if you feel as if, like, the academy youngsters that we've got, people like Dorrington, people like Charlie Sayers, like, I don't know how much time Ange has spent with them, but a friend of a friend went to the Enfield game and said that Charlie Sayers was extremely composed and looked the business. Now, granted, it's an under-21 game, but he's a left-footed centre-back. So it would be nice to see that when the team get back to Hotspur Way, that maybe he starts to join in a bit more with the first team training. That would be a perfect situation if Ange suddenly turns around and says, "This is the guy. Where has he been?" But yeah, if you were to say, I think Dyer will end up being the fourth.
Yeah.
I do.
I agree. You didn't mention Longley.
No, because I don't want Longley back at the club, because I don't think he suits. I mean, again, like Longley is a slightly more mobile version of Dyer, and he's left-footed, which helps. But I don't see. Again, like, if Barcelona say, okay, another loan, then that's the only thing that might convince me if we were super desperate. But he's not. For me, he wouldn't be on the radar at all.
Yeah. Is there any other positions outside of centre back that you would want see strengthened now in this window?
Sorry, again?
Any other positions outside of centre back you would want us to strengthen? I mean, I'm not sure where you'll fit them, but
are we talking about Kane maybe leaving? Look,
well, I mean, assuming Kane stays, I mean, let's just assume he stays.
I mean, like, right now, the only position I think that really needs strengthening is centre back. I think we have enough options all over the pitch to say we can do this. Right, we've got a number of fullbacks on either side. I don't necessarily feel like we've got a, let's say, right. I mean, this is the funny thing. Like, if Dyer, like, I don't want to use Dyer, but if Dyer was to play that right back position, right, that Porro is now trying to fill, Dyer, he wouldn't be left in those one-on-one situations that often, right? Which we don't want to see, because he's not playing centre back. He'd be moving into midfield, which maybe defensive midfield is more his position, and he's played fullback for Spurs before and done decently. He's got a pretty good
first game. Yeah, his first game was fullback. Yeah.
So again, we're scraping the barrel of solutions here, but Eric Dyer as a third choice inverted right back, allowing Spence to go out on loan, could work. But again, the thing with Dyer is he doesn't count as homegrown, and I do think that if we've only got 17 foreigners we can keep at the club, Dyer would be number 17 if he makes the cut. Right, there are other people that I would rather keep around, but again, these are the decisions that Ange is going to have to make, and I do think he'll make them quite quickly. We won't see many outs until maybe the last week or so, but I think that he will know relatively quickly. Like, he's probably got 20 players already in mind that he's like, these ones I definitely want to keep, and you've got maybe 3 or 4 positions that he's umming and ahhing about.
Yeah. Talking about Kane, let's just assume for a second he goes. We'll have that debate, I think, because it'll be interesting to have it. But Richarlison again has impressed on this tour.
Mhm.
He seems to suit the Ange system very well as well. Would you see if Kane was to go? Could Richarlison be that guy in Ange's system?
I mean, again, I don't know how many people watch all of the shows, but I've been on previous shows and have said I think Ange's system involves a lot of runners and a lot of like little dinks behind the back line. But it involves pullbacks. Like we've had numerous occasions in the games that I've seen where we've got to the byline, we've tried to play the ball across, and either it hasn't worked or it's been blocked, or like today with the Celso's goal, it fell our way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think a first-time finisher off either foot is actually suited for what Ange wants to do. I don't think we need that the kind of the number 9 that Richarlison is. Don't get me wrong, I think he plays well in the system, but if the ball's like if the ball's coming from the left-hand side and I have to hit it first time with my left foot, I am going to shank it 99 times out of 99, right? It would be a miracle if I connected perfectly. But I
yeah,
feel like that's the situation we're going to be in. We need someone who's good with either foot that will strike the ball first time and is willing and willing and capable to do it. If Kane is not there, then can Richarlison be that guy? Can Son be that guy more centrally? I don't know, but I think that's the kind of striker that Spurs will probably be looking for. And if you look at Celtic, their main striker Furuhashi, what 5'8"? I
yeah, yeah,
mean, when he's being stretched, he is not that archetypal ball rushing number 9, but he scored almost 30 goals for them. So
yeah.
it's nice to see Richarlison actually playing off the centre backs because that's what he wants to do. That's what he enjoys. That's what he does for Brazil. But yeah, I don't know if he's ever going to be that kind of striker, but
Mm.
he's clearly a confidence player. And if you give him chances, like again, if you connect well from 10 to 12 yards out, you've got a good chance of scoring. It doesn't have
Yeah,
to be in the corner.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just
yeah.
nice to see us creating these chances and work and playing inside the opponent's box because we just
If you
haven't done that for so long.
No, exactly. And if you're creating 20 chances in a game, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if you've got Richarlison up front, Kane up top, or Sonny up top. You're going to expect him to put at least two of those chances away, aren't you, in a game? At
yeah.
least.
Yeah, I would
So,
say so. I mean, because
yeah,
goalkeepers have no time to react. When the ball is hit well from a close distance, it's either going to get blocked by a covering defender, um, it might hit the keeper, but again, if that connection is strong, you will. I mean, I say almost certainly there is a good chance that it will go in the back of the net. I mean,
Mm.
even with the header that Danny Ings scored against us, like it wasn't a great header, but when he was that far out, it didn't need to be, and it was pretty close to Vicario when it went in. But again, if you have no time to react, then it will end up being a goal.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, let's talk about Kane. The Bayern Munich rumours aren't going away, well, mainly because Bayern won't shut up about him. Their president, or whatever you call him, I'm sure you've seen on the continent,
Hmm.
won't shut up about it. They're saying they're increasingly confident that Kane will come. Personal terms agreed, etc. My take on it, and I love yours, HG, is
Yeah.
I don't think it's anywhere near a done deal of Kane going to Bayern as it's being portrayed. Because if it was, we just wouldn't be playing him in the way that we're playing him in these preseason games. I just don't. I just can't see it when we've seen evidence on other
Mhm.
players that clearly aren't going to be part. Sanchez, a great example, that didn't have any involvement today. If it was even close, we just wouldn't play him. In my
Like,
opinion. In my opinion.
if you take it back to the Bale, it was 10 years ago since we sold Bale. And Bale
Yeah,
played that first, I remember, I think it was at Swindon. He played the first
yeah,
game,
yeah,
scored a great goal, and we all thought, oh my gosh. And then we never saw him again, right? And
yeah,
I suspect at that point, the deal had been done, right? That
yeah,
Real had offered a world record fee. I mean, that's what he was, remember? They'd offered a
yeah.
world record fee for Bale. And Spurs clearly said, right, well, look, we'll let him go towards the end of the window, but we have to get some replacements first. We don't want everyone to know that we're about to sell someone for £100 million, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. If that's the case with, I mean, that could be the case with Bayern, but Bayern would have to offer that kind of money for Spurs to say, all right, well, we'll take him out of the firing line. And clearly they haven't. And I think Bayern's confidence comes from the fact that they can't imagine that Spurs would consider keeping him when they've got 70, 80 million on the table for him. I understand that that's a pretty confident view, but this is Spurs and it's Harry Kane. Like that, the Harry Kane team, as much as I don't think that we are as reliant on him now as we were 4 months ago when he was scoring all our goals, it's still a situation that Bayern's confidence is based on what they think Spurs are thinking. And I don't think Spurs are thinking what Bayern want them to be. So, like, I'm sure Kane has, negotiated terms and would be, let's say, happy to go, but is okay with the idea. If he didn't want to go, that would have been made obvious to Bayern, and we wouldn't be where we are. But I think that Bayern's confidence stems from a belief that Spurs will cave, and the longer it goes on, why would Spurs cave? They'd have no time to find replacements. So unless Spurs, I saw a link today with a striker from France. Like, unless Spurs are actually going out and signing a striker, then it's still up in the air. But as soon as Spurs find a striker, that's it. We know Kane's off. End of.
Yeah. No, you're right. If you was a betting man, as you see it, HG, where are you going? Would he stay or would he go?
I think, bearing in mind that Ange is very, very consistent with this, I think Ange might say it's not worth keeping you around. It ends up being a distraction. So I think that he will go. But I think that Bayern will be the ones to bend, let's say, not Spurs. So, like, if 100, what's the latest offer officially? Like 80 million euros, something like that? Maybe 80 million. I don't know whether it's pounds or euros. If it gets to 100 million euros, like, I know Spurs fans are saying 100 million pounds. If it gets to 100 million euros, which is about 90 million quid, and the add-ons are something that you'd expect to see, like, not like if Bayern win the Champions League, that's not an add-on I expect to see, even with Kane there. Don't expect that. But if it's like scores 10 goals, again, football manager stuff, like plays 20 games, scores 10 goals, then okay. But I suspect around 100 million euros will get Kane in the end.
You think? Okay. And you think they'll pay that 100 million?
Yep.
Yeah.
I do. Like, people talk about Bayern not having the money. They do have the money. They've sold, is it the Hernandez brother who plays for them? Lucas Hernandez, I think. I think he's gone to PSG. Sadio Mane is almost certainly on his way to Saudi Arabia because they don't want him around. He's like a cancer to them. So the money is there. I like a central striker is what Bayern need. If they'd had a striker last year, they would have won the league by a country mile. The only reason it was close is because they didn't. And Kane is, to me, the best striker on the market. But Mbappe's got no interest in Bayern. If Kane does, that's the best they can get.
Sorry, HG, I lost the internet for a second then.
Okay.
Sorry, mate. I lost where you was at.
Well,
Sorry,
I hope they heard me. I just finished, so we're good. But I was basically saying that Bayern, they know that Kane is the best available option for them.
Yeah, I guess then, if it's going to happen, it has to happen this week, doesn't it? Before the game, the pre-season friendly on Sunday. You would think
it's a week on Sunday, isn't it?
Week Sunday. Week Sunday. Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest. I think the German season starts a week after ours. In fact, I know it does because the first game is on my birthday, so I know that. But it's I don't think anything will happen. I could see Kane going to Barcelona. I really could, because I think Bayern are more likely to be the ones to say, "Hey, look, we really need him in," than Spurs to say, "Hey, we really need him out." Unless we go on and sign a striker, and then what I've just said will be useless. But
do you see a world then? Kane goes to Bayern, and what is he there for 2 years? Because they're going to want him signed up for at least a 3-year deal, aren't they? For that,
I saw today it was 4, which weirdly I think 4 years is short. They had Lewandowski until he was 34.
Yeah,
I feel like Kane, bearing in mind that Kane treats his body like flipping Tom Brady did, Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like he is not your average 30-year-old. I mean, it's his birthday, Friday? But yeah, it's. I would be surprised if it was only 4, but maybe Kane only wants 4 because then he can do 3 years and come back to England at 33 and probably play another 3 to 5 years in the Premier League then.
and get the title. Yeah, get the
And
Premier League record.
if that's really important to him, then sure. But like I definitely think that any team in England, if they had the chance of signing Harry Kane at 33, for what 35, 40 million quid or whatever, they would do it. I absolutely think they would do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance he'll probably do a Sheringham and come back to Spurs. To be fair,
It would. I mean, that's the ideal situation, isn't it? Like he doesn't ruin his legacy. Like it's like I used to be into the NBA, right? When I was younger, not so much now, but when I was younger, the Utah team were really quite good. We're talking mid-90s, and they had a couple of players who had played at Utah their entire career but had never won a ring, right? And one of them went off to the Lakers to try and win a ring, and the other one didn't. And neither one of them ended up with one. I'm pretty certain in getting that right. So if Kane goes to Bayern Munich, wins 2 or 3 Bundesliga titles, maybe gets the Champions League, although I think they're still quite away from that. But with Tuchel in charge, he's won it before. He knows what to do. Then I think and Munich is a great place to live. It's not a bad place to raise your family, even if you don't speak German. All Germans speak English. Like if you listen to an interview with Thomas Müller, who again has never played in England, his English is better than like listening to Jamie Vardy. I mean, I don't want to pick on Vardy, but there are a number of English players that don't have the eloquence that Thomas Müller does. So it's not an issue that he won't speak German, that he may not have to learn German. So I think that if Kane is there for 3 years, he leaves with a year left. They proved when they sold Lewandowski at 34 and they got 50 million for him. So like for Bayern, if you're going to buy him for 100 million euros and you sell him for 50 million euros after 3 years, that's a pretty good deal. They would take that. Absolutely, they would take that.
Right. I don't know. I can't square in my mind HG, and I know I'm probably wrong, but what he gains from going to Bayern Munich, I just don't get it. I mean, it's like someone put in the comment, and I think it was a spot on comment. I can't remember who it is. Apologies, but you may as well go to Celtic. And it's that there's no it's guaranteed to win. What is it? 3-4 trophies every single season. What does that achieve? What's that do for his legacy and his reputation as the best striker in the world? It just doesn't. I just don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm wrong.
What does it achieve? It achieves like medals. I mean, that is the point, right? But like,
to what value?
but again, to who? To Kane, it's probably very valuable. I mean, he's got enough money to survive him for life. Like as much as like to me, a footballer. I mean, that's not just to me. I think that every footballer, right? They want 3 things. They want as much money as possible. They want as much football as possible, and they want as many trophies as possible, right?
Yeah.
And Kane has played a lot of football. And he gets paid pretty good money. I mean, he could be paid more in other places. Let's not lie about that. But the one thing that's lacking is trophies. He plays for England. He scored goals wherever. And like, I don't think he would look back at his career. I mean, if you ask, all those Bayern players that have, like Thomas Müller, who has at least 10 Bundesliga titles. I don't think he views that as being a cheap achievement. I understand that he's with the biggest club in Germany, and Dortmund are nowhere near the size of Bayern. Like, Bayern should be winning it every season. The fact that they almost didn't last year reflected badly on Bayern. It wasn't great for Dortmund that they threw it away, but for it to go down to the final few minutes reflected badly on Bayern. But I just think that as far as Kane is concerned, he's got everything else. He doesn't have a medal. And that's going to be important to him.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, arguably, he got a Tiger Cup today. So,
well, I mean, the picture that they showed, I think Spurs used it as their picture, and it's got Richarlison lifting the trophy, and Kane is right behind him, and it was almost like, okay, you're the man now. Like, it felt very symbolic of where we are as a club.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality to it was probably Richarlison scored a hat-trick, and it's like, you have the honours, mate. You lift up the trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's one of those. It's quite embarrassing. I mean, like I understand it's a trophy and like you have to take, but I'd be like, I'd lift the trophy and be looking somewhere else. Like I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
want. I certainly wouldn't be thinking, oh, the glee. But again, these people are competitive athletes, and any kind of
yeah,
success is that they will celebrate. Like if Spurs play Luton at home and win 4-0, like I think the players will come in and think, "Well done, boys!" Like there is
yeah,
that congratulatory sense that they'll have. So yeah, but to me, like I understand that winning the Bundesliga for Bayern is not as big an achievement as maybe winning something for Spurs, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a title for Spurs, but even a League Cup for Spurs might be considered more difficult than winning a Bundesliga with Bayern.
mm,
But I mean, I hate to say it, he's tried, he's not done it. Time is running out. Why not take the sure thing? Like if he was leaving to sign for a team that was in a similar position to Spurs, then I could say what's the point? But
yeah,
if you're gonna make the move, you're gonna want to make a move to again like Borussia Dortmund just lost their best player, right? And Bayern are getting strengthened if Kane signs there. So
mm,
it's probably the surest thing that you could have, and you know he will have eyes on a Champions League run, which Bayern are again guaranteed to be there every season.
yeah, yeah, yeah. How do you think him and the family would settle in Germany?
I mean, obviously, I'm biased because I moved to Austria and
Yeah,
like I'm not smart by any means. Really, I didn't do great at school, but I learned the language and I've been here 15 years. I think that Munich is an international city, right? As far as southern Germany is concerned, it pretty much is only Munich. Stuttgart is quite big, but Munich is 2 million people, I think, or just under, maybe a million and a bit. It's not small town. He will live probably just outside the city where it's gorgeous. It's not a bad move for him. I
mm,
understand that it takes, maybe family members away, and obviously with 4 children, or fourth is on the way, like having family around. But given the money that they have, given the situations I don't see it being like, going to Paris would be more of a struggle. Going to Barcelona would be more of a struggle. But Munich, I mean, again, given that it's in Germany, where almost everyone speaks a decent level of English, um, I don't think it's going to be a big struggle. I mean, again, some people can't do it. So I am like, if you really miss your PG tips, like, I mean, you can get it. I can get most things I grew up with in England. I can get here. I might again, I might struggle to pay those costs. They won't have that issue, but yeah, I just I can't think unless it's the kids in school, but they'll go to international
mm,
schools in English. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah,
it's basically just it's Manchester but nicer. In fact, you probably
yeah,
understand the English more. No offense to people from Manchester.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I'm going to be absolutely devastated today if and when that's announced that he goes. Honestly, I'm gonna. I just think how heartbroken it was about Bale and how hard it
See,
hit me. And that was
like,
different. Well, it was protracted in a similar way, I guess. I think the manner in him not turning up to training and stuff was a bit different, but it's
yeah,
gonna kill me. I think.
it's weird. Like, if you were to ask me who my favorite, like who my favorite player is, who the one I feel closest to, right? Because I think for Spurs fans, maybe for football fans in general, but like you end up picking a favorite for lots of reasons, and some people will pick the goal scorer because of that,
Mm,
right? Like he's the guy who's the glory of the team. The one that's never been me. Like I like Son, I like Kane, but I don't have that like when I had as a kid for Chris Waddle, right? I don't have any feelings really like that for a Spurs player right now. Um, Delhi had those moments where you thought he's a bit of a maverick. I guess I like those type of players. I don't see Kane as a maverick. I don't see Son as a maverick. They are extremely good football players, and they've proven it consistently. But there's no weakness per se. Do you know, like they're kind of flawed genius.
yeah.
And so like if Kane was to go, like I'd be sad because it would mean the end of an era. But I'd also be like I'm also very excited to see what Postecoglou will do and
Mm,
how Spurs will be. and maybe our team will be a bit of a flawed genius team where we'll be really good going forward and not so good at the back. But it will be an interesting journey, and I like that. Don't get I would love Spurs to be the methodical Bayern that just steamrollers every year, but I'm so down with what we've seen the last 3 or 4
Yeah.
seasons that like Kane being so media trained and doesn't say a word really to anyone, and what he does say is very, I don't want to say it's well thought out, but it's just bland, and
Mm.
I don't I tend to navigate towards those football players that aren't
Yeah.
as bland.
Yeah. What I would say is, regardless of whether Kane stays or Kane goes, whether Kane goes this summer or he goes next summer for free, Spurs will be fine. We'll be fine. We'll carry on. And I feel better, and similar to what you've been saying, HG, I feel better that if Kane is to go this summer, I feel better that we've got Ange at the helm, who seems to have a plan and seems to be changing the culture and philosophy at the club, and we'll be fine. It will hurt, but
We
we'll be
talked in the.
fine.
I mean, I know we've got various comments, but we talked over the last few years about what's the ideal situation with Kane, and for a lot of us, it was we sell him abroad, right? And it looks as if Bayern, maybe PSG, but Bayern are probably the only team that might end up making that particular dream come true. The odds of Kane signing a new contract are so slim. I don't think they really register. So,
Mm.
like, if we had Conte in charge still, I would be much more down about our chances, because you have to remember, if Conte was still in charge, we wouldn't have Lo Celso around, we wouldn't have Dombele around. Like, do you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
fact that Ange is making it possible for us to think that we could actually be better without Kane. Like 2 months
Mm.
ago, none of us would have dreamed that was ever possible, and yet
No.
here we are. So, like, it's a rough one, but I think that if you were to pick a way, then if Bayern pay 100 million euros, that's probably about as perfect as it gets.
Yeah. Yeah. So obvious question then, HG. You've pretty much sold Kane. You have sold Kane. Who's the captain next year? Who comes in as captain? Sonny?
No, it wouldn't be for Sonny for me, no.
No.
It wouldn't
Okay.
be.
Interesting.
I'd want someone, it sounds awful, I'd want someone with a history of winning, which there aren't many Spurs players that have won things. Um, I'd want someone who is respected within all like aspects of the camp, which Son clearly is. There's no doubt about that, right?
Yeah.
But I want someone on the pitch who I feel is going to push things our way and try to influence things our way. And Sonny, I don't see it. I think it's almost like those teachers that try too hard and they just get laughed at by the kids. It's like, oh, look at him really trying to
Mm.
be all kind of authoritative. And some players have it and some don't. And I don't think Sonny has it. So for me, I actually think Bentancur is probably the best choice. And
Yeah.
I like the fact that because he's injured, it's not as like because we've got a squad that hasn't really figured out its best team. To have someone lead that group who can't actually be like, we don't have to say Bentancur plus 10, right?
Yeah.
Because he's the captain and he's who we want to be. I just think Bentancur is a decent choice. Obviously, he speaks Spanish and Italian. He's probably learned English too. That's going to be a massive benefit. We do have other players around that would help him for sure. I think Bentancur is the right age. I think he just turned 26, maybe. He's won things at Juventus. He's been around
Yeah.
what it takes. Again, like Juventus, everything they win has got some kind of asterisk because of the whole Paratici nonsense. But still, that to me makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, makes sense to me too. Interesting one. Other shouts in the group chat for Davies, which I think was a joke, and
No,
Romero.
I don't think it is a joke. If I'm honest, I
You
think
not
Dan
think?
actually is serious.
Okay.
I mean, I'll put the comment up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, like Davies is, I will say this: he's well respected within the group. He's been at the club a very long time. I mean, it'll be 10 years next summer, I think. So again, like if I don't think he has that. I mean, we'll talk about being able to influence the game. I don't think Davies has that, and I would be surprised if Davies plays. Like again, if everyone is fit, Bentancur is going to play quite often. and Davies
Yeah.
probably wouldn't. But I just think, like, club captain, the whole idea of club captains, Davies might be a decent shot for that. But I think that, I don't like the difference. You've got one guy who kind of leads the group, and I think, I don't know what his personality is like, but I think Bentancur would be my shot.
Yeah. Bentancur is a great shout, to be fair. I do Romero. I think he's too volatile, isn't he? At this point, for me,
I mean,
not quite
I
there yet.
see the comments. They're talking about you could see him get his S together, try and keep
Yeah.
it a bit PG. But I agree. Like, again, you see it with players all the time. Even Maddison. Like, if you just said to me Maddison 2 or 3 seasons ago, I was like, oh, that bloke. Like, I wouldn't want to be his mate. He looked like a knob. Is that going to get us
Yeah.
banned? I mean, I just like it's, and yet now he's got. I guess he's married, but he's certainly got 3 children, and it appears as if he's matured. Like you often see young men do when responsibility hits them. Romero's got a child as well, and yeah, maybe it could mean something. But again, I think, like, if it becomes Bentancur, Romero, and Son, then I feel like you've got the brains, the brawn, and the
Yeah.
smile. Like, you've
Yeah.
got everything you might need as a leadership group to kind of
Yeah.
keep everyone together. Romero could end up being the kind of the Roy Keane in the background, where he holds everyone to a standard. Maybe we didn't see that last year from him, but from the interview he gave a few days ago, there's this idea that, like, or maybe it was yesterday, but like,
Yeah.
he sees, like, if he really believes what he said, that he wants to play for Spurs and he wants to be that guy, and he could have left but has chosen not to. Well, like, why wouldn't you want that in your leadership group? So
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. He talked about the fact. Yeah, I loved when he said he wants his best years to be at Spurs. Loved that. If he meant it, I'm sure he did.
I mean, like, it's crazy because Romero's probably 25 right now.
Yeah.
So again, he's
Yeah.
approaching his prime. He may think. I mean, like, again, I don't think he sees Tottenham as the pinnacle of his career, right? Like, I think he's probably thinking there is a big move left. But if he goes at 27, having done 2 years at Spurs and made us a bit of a force, great. Like, I mean, like, again, like, all we can do is hope that he means it. But I'd rather have someone say it than someone who keeps stum about how they really feel.
Yeah.
Like, you can decide whether it's believable or not, but I don't think Romero had any reason to come out and say those words, right? Like, he could have just said, "No, I wanted to be, how dare you question my commitment last season?" But he
Yeah.
didn't. He came out and said something that was actually positive and meaningful and wasn't a cliche. So I'm willing to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Shall we move on to, I guess, the final topic of the night for today is we have to talk about the news that Joe Lewis has allegedly been a bit of a naughty boy insider trading, has been indicted by New York prosecution, I believe. He surrendered himself to authorities. He's come out via his attorney and publicly vehemently denied any guilt in there, said he's completely not guilty. He's been in front of the courts. I believe he's been given bail of $300 million, which I'm sure he will pay. What impact do you see that has on the club, if any?
He's probably going to sell Kane to pay for it. No, I think, um, like, it's obviously not ideal, right? But Joe Lewis has been in charge of Spurs for 20 seasons, 20 odd years, right? At no point has he ever really been part of the conversation at Spurs, right?
Never.
It's always been Levy or Enoch. Like, we understand who Joe Lewis is, but he's very much the silent partner in this. And so, like, I do remember seeing a photo of him at weirdly enough, a Conference League game. I think the home game against Mura, he actually went, which I was like, of all the games to pick. But he's it's obviously not good for the club, right? Because it's the owner of Spurs, and people, if they want to drag our name through it, they will, right? But I don't know if it's really going to affect things. Like it might affect a few press conferences where they ask Ange a few questions about it, just as they did with Eddie Howe and the whole Saudi. Like, I mean, you know what, journalists are going to try and muckrake, but no, I don't know if. I mean, again, I'm no illegal expert, and I won't pretend to be, but I suspect that Joe Lewis has done more than enough preparation to enable that. Let's say the most valuable thing he owns is not taken from him. So I don't really like. I don't think it should affect the football at Spurs. I don't think it will affect the football at Spurs. I don't think football players will give it a second thought. But it's obviously not good, and we'd rather it wasn't the case.
Yeah, it's just more negative news, isn't it? That aids a certain narrative or what you may or may not see on social media, I guess, which isn't helpful at this moment
Yeah.
in time.
Can I just? I don't know why this is annoying me, but I do see one guy asking the same question repeatedly. I am not. I don't know. Like I don't think it's important at all. But yeah, it's why do you care so much?
Yeah,
It's of no value to anything. But in fact, to be honest, of all the people in the cheese room, I think one. I'm not sure. I've never really talked about it. It's not come up in conversation, but I am not.
yeah, yeah. It's a weird question.
Although, I mean, to
Um,
it's like I will say this openly. I have the right. No, how do I say this? I think that my biological great grandfather might have been, but I don't know anything about him apart from his name.
mm,
So, where my family is from, it's very likely that there's some history there. But no, I don't consider myself that. So
I'm
no.
apparently a third French.
Oh,
So
really? A
I think
third?
a third.
Hang
I
on
don't
a
quite know how that
second.
works. I
No,
don't know.
a third. You've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
like three parents, and one
Well, I
of
don't
them
know. I
is
think it's like
French.
no. I think it's a bit further down the line. I think it works out. But anyway, I've heard a rumor that I'm somewhere along the line linked to David Ginola, and we're
Oh,
distant.
vagina dildo.
Yeah. So David, I'll say me and him we go back. I reckon.
I, I am related to the girls from the sisters from All Saints.
No, you're not.
I am, yeah.
What?
One of them married one of the
How
Gallagher
are you
brothers.
related? How are you related?
Uh,
What's it? What's?
my aunt who married in her father, his second cousins apparently.
Wow.
I know it's so close. We're best friends.
Well, I mean,
But
to be honest with you, HD, this could do wonders for the Cheeseman rating if we could get them on.
I'm not sure they're football fans. I don't think my aunt is, to be fair, but she did marry into
No,
a Spurs family, so she's smart
well,
in that
exactly.
sense.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, if you get them on, I'll get Ginola on. How about that? We could have a little get. It'd be like a
man,
perfect dinner party.
yeah, but it'd be the one case. Can you imagine? We're there. I mean, I imagine they're good looking still, right? I mean, they're probably my age, but you've got these
Yeah, yeah.
two, and both you and I would be talking to Ginola. We'd ignore them,
Oh, we
right?
would.
We'd
You're
have
right.
no
Yeah.
interest. We'd be like David. I mean, I met David once. Um, outside. I used to work at the Natural History Museum a long time ago, selling dinosaurs in the dino shop. And across the road is South Kensington, which is obviously very French. And there's a Tesco Express, and I walked out of Tesco Express wearing a essential Tottenham top, and I looked up, and there was David Ginola walking the other way, and he clocked that I was Spurs, and so obviously he knew that I would recognise him, and I was like, morning, shook his hand,
Mm.
and then off he went. Didn't get a selfie, didn't get any of that, but I was that's my major memory about working in one of London's most beautiful buildings.
Yeah.
Was
I
meeting
loved
David Ginola outside with my pasta meal from Tesco.
love it. I love Ginola. I loved it when he played for us. Interesting fun fact, actually. There was an article I saw. Someone wrote a blog and it was on Twitter on Ginola, and it stated that he is one of only two players who have got player of the season and finished outside the top four positions in the Premier League history.
Wow.
And the other one was
Oh, you guys going to be probably a Spurs player, Bale.
yes, yeah, yeah.
As soon as you said outside the top four, I was like, well, we've got this one sorted. That's the Spurs player for sure.
Yeah, Spurs, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, that season, I'm assuming it was probably 98, 99.
Yeah, it was when we had Gross in charge, wasn't it? And we went to the beat Barnsley in the FA semi-final, FA Cup semi-final.
Yeah, FA Cup.
Fun.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if Gross was in charge, but it was definitely.
Or maybe it was.
I remember.
Maybe it was the guy from Graham. It might have been Graham.
I think it might be George Graham. I remember the FA Cup game at home against Leeds, where Anderton scored that rocket from like 30 yards, and Ginola got the other one, and I think he went on one of those mazy runs where he doesn't actually beat anyone, just gets wider and wider and wider, but still manages to hit the post. But he was a player. Oh, man, was he a player? And again, like that's the kind of maverick player that I like, right? I mean, we're talking about someone who, like, I liked Asu Akoto, right? And it wasn't because he was a wonderful footballer; it was just how he played the game that attracted me to him.
Yeah, I mean that '98 squad. If you look at it, I'm just going to get it up, but I'm pretty confident to say we had obviously Darren Anderton, one side, Ginola the other side. We had Les Ferdinand, Klinsmann. I mean, it's a front three.
We avoided relegation by what?
We avoided relegation. I mean, it's a travesty, isn't it? You look at that. I mean, don't get me wrong. The rest of the squad was completely bang average.
Especially Walker, that centre back. That centre back who left a couple of years later, he was awful, and a real like piece of work as a human as well. Just a legend in his own mind, and only that.
Yeah. Stefan Freund, though. I had a thing for Stefan Freund, Germany as well. German.
So he's often on Austrian TV for like Champions League stuff or Europa League stuff, and I'm always tempted to try and wangle a ticket just so I could be like. I mean, if I met Stefan Freund, I would be made up, right? I would absolutely be made up. And it's, 25 years ago that you played for Spurs. But yeah. One of those players that, I don't know, maybe the Lamella of his day, as in he gave everything always and was relatively limited. But Stefan Freund,
I remember.
Again, go on, sorry.
So I just remember when we signed him in that '98 season, and it was like we got him from Borussia Dortmund. Dortmund. And I remember thinking at the time, like, what a massive signing this is to get a player from Dortmund to come into Tottenham. It was up there with the only other one similar was Edgar Davids when we signed Edgar Davids. That sort of level of signing, it was just, I loved him.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with being a very committed, like all action, give everything on the pitch player when your job is to find the football. Right?
Yeah.
It's just that if your job is to actually do something else with the football, then that kind of player is not what I want.
Yeah.
No digs on Lamella intended by name. Oh, I've just done it.
No. Well, yeah. No, quite. Right.
Oh.
Craig,
I think. Sorry, Craig. I think you left for a second.
A good hour, 22 minutes of chat about Tottenham. That's the cue, I think. It's the internet saying to me, "You've used all your bandwidth tonight, Craig. Get out quick." But no, I think we'll call it there if you're okay with that. Unless there's anything more pressing to talk about.
No, look, I'm sad that people have asked a whole bunch of questions that we've been reading. We talk about Spence a little bit. We talk about the guy, the Senegalese midfielder who loves a shot from outside the box. Agreed, he does. I'm not sure why. But we've like there's some great comments tonight. We are reading them as we're talking. It's just very difficult to stop mid-flow and give them the due that they have.
And to be fair, we do always talk. I think we've talked about every comment that's coming. I think pretty much one way or another, indirectly. But it is great. We love it when you guys talk, particularly about. It's got particularly chatty when we've been talking about that 98-99 season team and the memories of that Worthington Cup final, which I was at. And I was also Stephen, by the way. Yeah. That's that was my first or second season when I really started going. I wasn't a season ticket holder, but I went to home and away like that time when I was young, free, single, and had money to burn. And it was a great time. So I remember my highlight from that time, and there wasn't many highlights, but there was a season. It was definitely when Christian Gross was there, and we played Wimbledon about 3 or 4 times in the space of 2 weeks. It was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
And we beat them 5-1 away from home, 5-2. Musa Saeed scored a goal, and Klinsmann scored a goal. And I always remember, my biggest memory is 2 things. Walking to that game, there was a guy that was walking to the ground at Wimbledon, and he was a spitting image of Christian Gross. And the whole crowd from the train station was chanting, "Are you Christian Gross in disguise?" And then the second biggest memory was being in the ground, obviously, and chanting, "Christian, what's the score? Christian, what's the score?" And he sees his little hand come up with the 5. And that's the only time I ever heard a Spurs fan chant Christian Gross's name.
In a positive way, at least.
In a positive way.
But yeah, no, they were bad times, but they were also good memories. I mean, it sounds weird to say that, but that's kind of how it was.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. Yeah. All right then, guys. Well, thanks, HG, for coming on and chatting with me for an hour and 25 minutes. I appreciate it.
No problem. Lenny Beckford. I have no idea who Gareth A. Davis, the boxing commentator, is, but if he sounds like me, he must be good.
Definitely. All right then, guys. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Please do hit that like button and subscribe. We're back on Friday. I don't know who's on Friday. Do you know who's on Friday? Are you?
I think I am. So you get me again talking about the same stuff, but I don't know who else is on Friday. But it's
great. Well,
like, it's Spurs again. Like, to me, like I will say this: like, I do talk a lot, and everyone knows I talk a lot, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. But I love reading the comments. Like, I want to talk about what you want us to talk about. So please join us on Friday night, and because it's Spurs. Like, what would life be without Spurs? It doesn't work. It's not worth thinking about, really, is it?
No. And you never know. We might have a centre back to talk about. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe we've sold one.
Yeah, sold one. Maybe bought one. You never know. But no, all right, guys. Well, have a great week, HG. Everyone listening, appreciate you all popping in and seeing us tonight. And last thing to say is, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.